Let's bring in Raymond James Policy analyst Ed Mills and Michael O'Hanlon. He's director of research for foreign policy at Brookings. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Michael O'Hanlon, anything you can add to what we know at this hour, and what do you expect next after this escalation?
Greetings. Well, no, I can't add too much until we know whether targets have been struck, whether it really is 200 and some missiles in a two-phase attack against 4 sites. I think we need to understand all of that. Some kind of an Iranian response was almost inevitable. And if this winds up being essentially on the scale of April 13th, which is, as you know, a day when Iran tried a similar kind of thing and just didn't get the stuff through, then I think you might conclude that things can start to level off for the moment. On the other hand, if a lot of these weapons do get through, if civilian targets are struck, and if the United States decides to get involved, then, of course, there's all bets are off as to where this could go. So I was struck the United States has said that we would retaliate. I don't know yet what that's going to mean.
Understood. And just to be clear, you're saying if we see not much success of these missiles getting through and this escalation is basically the apex of what we can expect, then you could almost take it as now we can look beyond this. But if they do make some strikes, if civilians are involved and so forth, then if the U.S. gets involved, that to you would represent a new chapter.
That's right. In a nutshell, that's essentially what I'm trying to argue. But again, the data is so incomplete that it's hard to draw any firm conclusions.
Ed, how should we be thinking about this, both for investors as the markets try to figure out how to react to it, and in terms of the response from the U.S.?
Yeah, Kelly, I think Michael is absolutely right. We have to see exactly what the damage is here. And is that an opportunity to kind of start or restart some of the diplomatic conversations? When you look at any of the responses that have come out of the White House, come out of national security officials, it is always about how the diplomatic options are the best path forward here. When we look at this from an electoral perspective, you have a lot of Americans, about 70 to 75% of Americans, saying the country's on a wrong track. That is something that generally says this would be a change election. And then you have the debate as to which candidate would bring about the greater change. Certainly, Donald Trump would be making that point. Right. However, I think it is way too soon to kind of have that,
in the arena of foreign policy
on the election just yet.
Ed, President Biden obviously has talked a lot about, in many ways he thinks foreign policy is a big part of his legacy. This eruption on the eve of him, turning the presidency over to one of his successors tells you what exactly, and does it change at all the odds for who wins in November? Yeah,
Kelly, I think it shows you kind of how unpredictable all of this is, how difficult it is to get a near-term de-escalation. It is one of those things where you have to escalate before you can de-escalate, kind of something that changes the calculus. Certainly Israel, since October 7th of last year, has certainly felt a increased pressure trying to defend themselves. And I just wonder if we're on October 1st. We always look for October surprises. The port strike, several other things that are looming out there. We have a vice presidential debate tonight. A lot of cross currents, a lot of details in a very close election. So a little bit too early to tell exactly how the impact of this is until we know how it plays out.
Michael, we spoke yesterday to some extent about the response of international bond markets, the Lebanese markets in particular. I'm actually maybe pricing in some hope that this could be the beginning of what could ultimately be a brighter chapter for that country. Is it too soon to talk, and this is what markets like to discount, about this being a kind of dark before the dawn moment?
It's possible, and I suppose we should all try to keep some degree of optimism as we watch such horrible things happening in the broader Middle East. But I think that, at least we're not seeing Iran do something radically different than it ever considered before. At least we haven't awakened to the news of 10 Israeli ambassadors around the world being assassinated, or to American targets being targeted by Iran. So in that sense, what we've seen so far, you could say maybe it could have been worse. But we don't really know where this is going to end, and we don't really know what the United States is going to do by way of retaliation. Are we going to hit back at Iranian missile launchers? Are we going to hit back at Iranian air defense sites to help Israel be able to attack and retaliate on Iranian territory proper? That's a huge fraught thing. One thing I'm sure of, this has changed the vice presidential debate tonight, because this has to be the first issue. This now has to be, I don't see how you don't begin with this issue while it's an ongoing crisis. And so whatever tactics people had in mind for how to greet each other and how to make an opening joke or pleasantitude or platitude or what have you, or try to talk about some big vision for the future, I think this is going to suck a lot of the oxygen out of the room to start the debate.
Was there anything the U.S. could have done to try to, prevent it at this point? Or is the matter, I don't want to say this, but in some respects out of our hands? Let me point out as well, we still don't know the details of this purported shooting that's taken place in Tel Aviv, and all of this is on the eve of Rosh Hashanah.
That's right. No, I don't know what we could have done. You can debate the whole policy and the whole history of our involvement in the broader Middle East, but I think you'd have to go back a while to find a moment when we had enough leverage to have prevented what happened today. I think, in general, this is still a logical consequence of last year's October 7th tragedy and everything that's happened since. And maybe we could have tried to shape events subsequently in a little bit more compelling way than we have. But for the most part, it's the regional actors who are driving the decisions and driving the next steps.
Quick follow-on to that, from especially where international investors are concerned, looking at the price of oil and the oil revenues that Iran has been able to raise over the past couple of years. Is that where a lot of this escalation began? Would you trace it back to that? And what happens at this point if Iranian oil facilities become part of a broader conflict? Again, the markets are not discounting a huge possibility of that, but oil is jumping nevertheless.
I think you trace it back to what happened last October 7th. That was the fundamentally cataclysmic event. That was the big change. Prior to that, as you may recall, there were a lot of Middle Eastern experts who were saying that the Middle East looked relatively calm in the summer of 2023. Obviously, it wasn't. Obviously, Hamas had no intention of letting an ongoing Saudi-Israeli reconciliation process continue unhindered. Obviously, even if Saudi and Iran were getting along a little bit better, it didn't mean they were going to give Israel carte blanche to do what it wanted to in retaliation for an attack. And so Hamas was correct in the sense that that terrible tragedy on October 7th provoked an Israeli reaction that left much of the rest of the broader Middle East against Israel, even though Israel's self-defense was justifiable. And therefore, a lot of what's followed was predictable after October 7th. So that was the key turning point.
Israeli police are saying they're concerned about another terror attack at a hotel near Tel Aviv while Iraq has shut down its airspace. Ed Mills, what were you going to add, especially, again, as we're going to hear from both vice presidential candidates tonight, but presumably we'll hear from the presidential candidates in much more detail and the president himself about what the U.S. is now considering, watching, willing to support?
Yeah, so I think from the Biden team, I think they're going to want to express for their desire to have a diplomatic solution, but a full support of Israel. We have seen from Vice President Harris after the attacks on Hezbollah, very clearly labeling Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, saying kind of the death of their leader brings about some level of comfort for the victims of Hezbollah. From Donald Trump, I think he is going to say that this is a yet another example of, under Biden's leadership, that there is a wrong track of the kind of country, and that this is something that he would not allow, and that he would fully stand with Israel. From a market perspective, when I've talked to our team here at Raymond James, what has been remarkable is kind of the resiliency of the market, especially with oil markets. What we'll be watching there is there a physical impact to supply? And the American response and kind of additional kind of regional responses is going to be key on that physical supply aspect.
And Michael, again, I don't know if there's an opening for the U.S. to come in and try to work with Lebanon or some of these other countries to say, look, this is now an opportunity to kind of rid the terror that's been harbored in your nation and try to build towards something more constructive. But it's going to be some time for those talks to begin. And yet, could this be a leverage point that didn't previously exist?
Maybe, but I think it's going to take something else. I think, for example, a ceasefire over Gaza. If we don't have that as part of the equation as well, and then a diplomatic process that begins to envision some kind of greater autonomy and independence ultimately for the Palestinians, I don't know how the Arab world lives with this. And so, yes, you're right. The individual populations throughout the broader Middle East suffer from these kinds of tragedies and probably should want for a new page to be turned over. But it's the Hamases, the Hezbollahs that are making the key decisions that start us down these new paths. And I'm afraid that they don't always have their own people's best interest at heart. They are motivated more by an anti-Israeli vision, and Israel's decided it just can't live with things the way they were, so it's taking much different, more escalatory steps than it has before. So we're really in a cycle of trying to contain escalation. I'm having a hard time just yet looking at silver linings.
That said, Israel had to know there would be some degree of response from Iran. Do you think this degree is in line with what might be expected, or a ratcheting up beyond that? And if so, what further measures might we expect Israel to take?
From what I've seen so far, it's about the kind of thing I might have expected. But I'm struck still by the United States statement that we may get involved, and also by the earlier decision to put an attack submarine into the general vicinity of Iran and tell the Iranians it was there. The reason you do that is not to have a defensive capability, it's to have an offensive strike capability. So I think the United States may be considering direct strikes on Iranian territory, which itself would be a big step, just as Iran has crossed a threshold in now attacking Israel directly, both on April 13th and now October 1st.
Do you think that's truly likely, the U.S. Having involvement with Iran directly at this point?
I don't know. I'd have to parse the words, but I think the more important thing is to wait and see. And if we just hit, 4 missile launchers in the middle of the desert, that's one thing. If we think we have to be involved in a more comprehensive attack to prevent Iran from doing this again, that's something else altogether.
Indeed. I want to mention Lufthansa has stopped flying over the Middle East, and the death toll from the Tel Aviv shooting is now put at 8. As these details, scant though they are, continue to come in, and we'll monitor the story. Michael O'Hanlon, Ed Mills, for now, thanks. We appreciate it. Again, the exchange covering the launch of missiles, more than 200 at this point, into Israel. We'll have more details on the other side of this break.